before the apologies of absence?
No, before the official meeting
Yeah,
starts.
yeah.
Oh, excuse me. Before the official meeting starts, you've all got an email in front of you to consider with regards to the a couple of items on the agenda. So probably in the 2 minutes that we've got left, may be worthwhile just having a look through that. If that helps, hopefully it's helpful. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the full council meeting on Wednesday, the 26th of September. Moving on to agenda item 1, which is apologies for absence. Do we have any? Councillor Johnson?
Councillor Williams unable to attend tonight. He's working out of the area.
Mayor, Councillor Bronwyn Brooks, but she's...
Okay, no problem. Okay, moving on to agenda item 2A, which is to hear the roll call of members.
Councillor Julie Aviett. Councillor Vincent Bailey.
Present, nothing to declare.
Councillor Rhiannon Birch.
Present, nothing to declare.
Councillor Jonathan Bird.
Present, nothing to declare. Picture just in time.
Councillor Bronwyn Brooks. Councillor Liz Burnett. Councillor George Carroll.
Present, nothing to declare.
Councillor Christine Cave.
Present, nothing to declare.
Councillor Janice Charles. Councillor Millie Collins. Councillor Jeff Cox.
Present, and I declare an interest in agenda item 11, personal interest, and that's to do with Llanbreddian Council and Pentline Community Council, the community review. I declare an interest because I'm a member of Cobridge with Llanbreddian Town Council.
Councillor Pamela Drake. Councillor Vince Driscoll. Councillor Stuart Edwards. Councillor Ben Gray. Councillor Owen Griffiths. Councillor Stephen Griffiths. Councillor Tony Hampton. Councillor Sally Hanks. Councillor Nick Hodges. Councillor Hunter Jarvie. Councillor Gwyn John. Councillor Ian Johnson. Councillor Gordon Kemp. Councillor Peter King. Councillor Matthew Lloyd. Councillor Kevin Marney. Councillor Catherine McCaffer. Councillor Ann Moore. Councillor Neil Moore. Councillor Michael Morgan. Councillor Jane Norman. Councillor Rachel Nugent-Finn. Councillor Andrew Parker.
Present, and I declare an interest in agenda item 11, a personal interest. My daughter is a member of the Pentline Community House.
Councillor Bob Penrose. Councillor Sandra Perks. Councillor Andrew Robertson. Councillor Leighton Rowlands.
Present, nothing to declare.
Councillor Ruba Sivanyanam. Councillor John Thomas. Councillor Neil Thomas. Councillor Margaret Wilkinson. Councillor Eddie Williams. Councillor Mark Wilson. Councillor Margarita Wright.
Okay, moving on to agenda item 3, which is to approve the minutes of the last meeting held on the 18th of July. All agreed? Yeah. Moving on to agenda item 4 is to receive any announcements from myself, the leader, members of the Cabinet and the Head Pay Services, and to receive any petitions submitted by members. I do have announcements. So far during my term of office, I've attended 113 events ranging from civic events, charity events and concerts in the last 5 months. I have been proud that the Vale of Glamorgan has hosted the first Armed Forces Day and the first 10k run over at Barry Island. Both of these were huge successes. I was very pleased to launch the first school Lego League at Casden Primary School, which helps with the STEM subjects, which is science, technology, engineering and maths. And I also visited Casden School during the school holidays, who held the first SHEP project, which educates children in healthy eating and exercise. I recently welcomed Barry Island Primary School to the Council Chamber. The school was the first to contribute to the Vale of Glamorgan's new corporate plans for improving the county, and the pupils fully enjoyed it and had some great ideas which will be taken forward. I also welcomed our twinning towns from Rheinfelden, Mucron and Faircombe to the Vale of Glamorgan for the Beat Eats and Treats event, and I was also honoured to welcome the Youth Exchange from our twinning towns and our pupils from the Vale of Glamorgan to reveal an outstanding piece of artwork designed by them to show the friendship we have between our twin towns. Over the last few months has been one of the most proudest moments of my year so far. Remembering those who have lost their lives at sea on Merchant Navy Day, and listening to the stories of the veterans, celebrating the 80th year of the Barry Raffer branch at their concert, and seeing RAFs in Afon exercise their freedom to march through the streets of the Vale of Glamorgan and in my hometown of Barry. Around 390 RAF personnel met at Kin Square in Barry before marching down Houghton Road to the council civic offices. It was one of the final parades out of 5 that St Afon had led across South Wales, and it was a pleasure to allow the parade commander, Wing Commander Steve Rowley, to march with a rare RAF Claymore sword, one of only 3 known in its existence in the UK. The Freedom Sword was gifted to the Vale of Glamorgan Council in 1974 when RAF St Afon was awarded honorary freedom of the county borough. The sword was last paraded in 2013, but this was the first time that the station commander had carried the sword through the Freedom Parade. Last week I attended the Royal British Legion Remembrance Festival at Barry Memo, and the event was well attended. The service started with the South Wales Police Band playing with the veterans marching in the hall, with the Royal Navy Reserves at HMS Cambria and the University Royal Navy unit personnel. They should all be very proud of themselves. There were performances from the pupils of St Cyri's School and Barry Male Voice Choir. A moment of reflection was given where we saw the men who gave their lives with information from where in Barry they lived and how they gave their lives up to defend our country. It was very moving. Fundraising for the Mayor's Foundation has continued, and I held my first barbecue to raise funds for the foundation. I'm pleased to announce that I have given 3 cheques out to Barry Round Table, the Shroptimists and Barry Athletics Youth Cricket Club, with many more organisations and charities to follow. I would like to thank everyone who has supported the fundraising so far. During my mayoral year, over 20 local charities have benefited from exposure on social media and in the press. I will continue to work hard for the residents of the Vale of Glamorgan and continue to help and support charities and organisations within the Vale of Glamorgan. Thank you. Moving on to agenda item 5, which is the appointment of the Vice Chair to the Public Protection Licensing Committee and Statutory Licensing Committee. Leader?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I move Councillor Janice Charles.
I second that.
Councillor Moore?
Can I move Councillor Owen Griffith?
Those in favour? Oh, Councillor Hodges? Okay. Those in favour of Councillor Janice Charles? Those in favour of Councillor Owen Griffiths? And those in favour of Councillor Ian Johnson? Okay, I believe that Councillor Charles is notably elected as the Vice Chairman of Public Protection Licensing Committee. Moving on to agenda item 6 was the Scrutiny Committee's annual report from May 2017 to 2018. Leader?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to call upon Councillor George Carroll, who's the Chairman of the Lead Scrutiny Committee, Corporate Resources, to present the Scrutiny Committee's annual report to Council. George.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. The annual report has been produced in accordance with section 7.44 of the Council's Constitution, which states that the Scrutiny Committees must report annually to full Council on their workings. The report provides an overview of the role of scrutiny, how scrutiny is undertaken in the Vale of Glamorgan, and highlights the key achievements of the work of the Scrutiny Committees over the year May 2017 to April 2018. As Chairman of the Corporate Performance and Resources Scrutiny Committee, I have pleasure in presenting this report to Council. I can advise you that the report has been circulated to members of the Scrutiny Committee Chairman and Chairman Group and has been considered by all 5 Scrutiny Committees at recent meetings, and any suggested comments have been incorporated into the document before you. For clarification purposes, Mr. Mayor, I can advise that my Scrutiny Committee met on the 20th of September 2018 and no further comments were made on the document. Page 14 of the report, Mr. Mayor, refers to key work for Scrutiny Committees in 2018-19 and makes reference to the recommendations in the Wales Audit Office report following a follow-up review of how scrutiny in the Vale operates. From this review, the WAO sent in 7 proposals for improvement, and an action plan to progress each of the proposals has been prepared and presented to the Scrutiny Committee Chairman and Vice Chairman Group, and this will also be presented to the Corporate Performance and Resources Scrutiny Committee in November 2018. I therefore submit this report to full Council.
Thank you, Councillor Carroll. So the recommendation that the Council receive the Scrutiny Committee's annual report for the period of May 2017 to April 2018. All those in favour of receiving the report? Yeah. Okay, that's carried. Okay, moving on to agenda item 7, which is the use of the Managing Director's emergency powers. Leader?
Right, 1 minute. Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. The report seeks to notify Council of the exercising of the Managing Director's emergency powers in respect of Council functions since the last report in February 2018. Council is therefore requested to note the following. Firstly, that the Leader of the Labour Group requested that Councillor Neil Thomas replace Councillor Owen Griffiths on the Healthy Living and Social Care Scrutiny Committee with immediate effect, and that I requested, as Leader of the Conservative Group, that Councillor Catherine McCaffrey replace Councillor Michael Morgan on the Public Protection Licensing Committee and the Statutory Licensing Committee with immediate effect. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader. And the recommendations that the report will be noted. Everyone content that will be noted? Yeah. Okay, moving on to agenda item 8, which is the review of the Vale of Glamorgan Council's local dispute resolution procedure. Deputy Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is really a housekeeping matter here. Members have before them a revised local dispute resolution procedure, which is based on the model which was adopted by the Council back in 2014. This has been the subject of extensive consideration by the Council Standards Committee, having reflected on the independent members' experience of working with the procedure and having considered comments made by group leaders. Paragraph 7 of the report summarises the latest feedback from group leaders received by the Standards Committee, with paragraph 9 of the report reflecting the committee's observations. Appendix B is a linked document setting out the procedure to be followed at a stage 3 hearing. And this is with a view to assist the panel members and inform council members so that there is clarity on the approach that will be adopted at the hearing and the various stages involved. As will be noted, the Standards Committee have given long and careful consideration to this matter, and therefore I move that the revised local dispute resolution procedure attached at Appendix 1 to the report and the local dispute resolution procedure conduct of stage 3 hearing attached at Appendix B be approved and replace the existing procedure in the Council's constitution. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Second that,
Okay, so the recommendation is to approve the local dispute resolution procedure. All those in favour? And any that are against? Okay, that is carried. Moving on to agenda item 9, which is the review of the Council's constitution and officers' delegations. Deputy Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Again, a housekeeping matter, really. As members will note from the report, paragraph 4 proposes a number of changes to the existing officer delegations in the Council's constitution for the reasons given in the report. Can I just point out that the proposed additional delegation at paragraph 4, Roman 3, should read as follows: to authorise payment of grant awards from the Mayor's Foundation in consultation with the Mayor. And subject to that amendment, everything is set out perfectly clearly in the report. Subject to that amendment, I move that the changes to the officer delegations as set out in the report and subject to that revision I just mentioned are approved and the Council's constitution be amended accordingly. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I second that, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, so the recommendation that the changes to the officer delegations as set out below be approved and the constitution be amended accordingly. All those in favour? Okay. Any against? Okay, that's carried in favour. Thank you. Jeff. Okay, moving on to agenda item 10, which is the community review of Catalonia, Cardiff and Barry, which is in Barrack and Castellan wards. Deputy Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The members have gone who've declared interests on in this item. This is the first of 3 community review reports which I'm going to present to Council tonight, and it deals with the boundary line for the Barrack and Castle land wards of the Vale of Glamorgan Council and of Barry Town Council, insofar as it relates to the property known as Catalina, Caerdavith in Barry, and follows on from a request received from the Local Democracy and Boundary Commission for Wales for the review to be undertaken. The report refers to the consultation undertaken with a summary of the submissions received at the close of the first stage set out in Appendix C. No further submissions were received during the second stage of the consultation process. Appendix A details the Electoral Registration Officer's final proposal, which is to amend the boundary line to ensure that the property is contained wholly within the boundary of the Castle Land Ward. And so in line with the Electoral Registration Officer's final proposal, I move that the Council notes and endorses the ERO's final proposal as set out in Appendix A, and secondly, that the ERO be authorised to submit the final proposal to the Local Democracy and Boundary Commission for Wales for consideration to proceed with an order for authorisation by the Welsh Minister. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Second that, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, all those in favour of the recommendations? And any against? Or any abstentions? Moving on to agenda item 11, which is the community review of Cowbridge with Llanbevian Town Council and Pencline Community Council. Deputy Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Everyone has gone who should have gone, and everyone has come back who should have come back, I think. This community review stems from a request from the Cowbridge with Llanbevian Town Council for a review to be undertaken of the boundary between the Town Council area and the Pencline Community Council area, and in light of the planned development on the land northwest of Cowbridge, known as Darren Farm. Paragraph 10 of the report refers to the consultation undertaken. Appendix C summarises the submissions received at the initial consultation stage, with no further submissions having been received during the second stage. Following the close of the consultation period, a letter containing further representations was received from the Cowbridge Town Council. It's attached to the report, and a meeting to discuss the further representations was held between representatives of that Town Council, the Electoral Registration Officer and the Electoral Registration Manager. The ERO is satisfied that had the representations been received during the statutory consultation period, her conclusion of no change would stand. And it is noted that, given the phasing of the development and the anticipated timescales for development, together with the fact that Phase 1 falls within the current boundaries of the Town Council, it is considered that the existing boundary is appropriate and that the request is premature. So, in line with that, I would move that the Council notes and endorses the Electoral Registration Officer's final proposal of no change as set out in Appendix A to the report. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Second that, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, all those in favour of the recommendation? Anyone against? Or anyone abstaining? That's carried in favour. Moving on to agenda item 12, which is the community review of St Bride's Major Community Council. Deputy Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is the last of the reports I'm going to present tonight. It relates to a request from St Bride's Major Community Council for the number of members in the Ogmore by Sea ward to be increased from 5 to 6, due to an anticipated increase in the number of properties within the ward during 2017 to 2019. It's noted from the terms of reference for the community review was widened to consider the number of members elected to both the Ogmore by Sea ward and the St Bride's Major ward of that community council. Paragraph 13 of the report refers to the consultation undertaken with a summary of the submissions received at the close of the first stage set out in Appendix C. No further submissions were received during the second stage of the consultation. The conclusions of the Electoral Registration Officer are set out in Appendix A to the report, and I'd like to highlight that the ERO considers that the increase in the electorate is small and will have minimal impact, and therefore the current electoral arrangements for the St Bride's Major Community Council are appropriate, and the ERO recommends no change. Therefore, I move that the Council notes and endorses the ERO's final proposal of no change as set out in Appendix A to this report. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Second, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, all those in favour of the recommendations? Moving on to agenda item 13, which is the Statement of Accounts 2017 to 2018. Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The purpose of the report before you is to request that Council approve the Statement of Accounts and the Annual Governance Statement and agreeing the final letter of representation for 2017-18. The Welsh Audit Office is the body responsible for undertaking the external audit work within the Vale of Glamorgan Council. Under the Accounts and Audit Wales Amendments Regulations 2018, the Council and the Auditor General are required to meet earlier statutory deadlines with regard to the closure of accounts. Under the amended regulations, these revised deadlines are being phased in, with the final change taking effect from 2020 to 21. In the Audit of Financial Statements report, the WAO has acknowledged that in terms of the 2017-18 financial statements, Council officers have made strong progress in producing the draft financial statements 2 weeks earlier than in prior years, without compromising the quality of the draft accounts or the supporting working papers. Officers have fully engaged with the auditors in resolving their audit queries. These attributes were crucial in enabling the WAO to conclude their main testing by the end of August. And I would personally like to thank the officers for all their work in meeting these new shorter deadlines. In his proposed audit report to this Council, the Auditor General has stated that the financial statements give a true and fair view of the financial position of the Vale of Glamorgan Council as at the 31st of March 2018 and of its income and expenditure for the year then ended, and have been properly prepared in accordance with the Code of Practice on Local Authority Accounting in the United Kingdom 2017-18. He has also stated that it is the intention of the appointed auditor to issue an unqualified audit report on the financial statements once the relevant council officers have provided a signed final letter of representation. Under the Accounts and Audit Regulations, the Statement of Accounts must be approved before the 30th of September and signed and dated by the Mayor as Chairman of the Council. And in addition, the Annual Governance Statement needs to be formally approved by Council and signed and dated by the Leader of the Council. On the 19th of September 2018, Audit Committee considered an agenda item entitled Audit of the 2017-18 Financial Statements, reporting to those charged with governance. Audit Committee recommended that the report of the Wales Audit Office be approved and that the 2017-18 financial statements, including the final letter of representation and the annual governance statement, be recommended for signature by those authorised. So the recommendations of the report are that the letter of representation to the Wales Audit Office for 2017-18 be noted and is agreed and signed and dated by the Mayor as Chairman of the Council. Secondly, that the annual governance statement within the Statement of Accounts for 2017-18 be approved and signed and dated by myself as Leader of the Council. And 3, that the Statement of Accounts for 2017-18 be approved and signed and dated by the Mayor as Chairman of the Council. And I so move.
I second that, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Mark Wilson, who's the Chair of Order, would like to say anything?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm really pleased with the officers here in doing this report so soon, given the fact that the pressures of all the councils in Wales are under enormous pressure because of austerity. And I think they've done a fantastic job bringing this report 2 weeks early. But we know that in the future it could be getting worse and worse. And I know that we were very frustrated with the auditors there, of course, who are also quite frustrated because it will put more and more pressure on this authority and other authorities to bring the accounts in more forward. And we actually, we are concerned that in the future we may have to go audit in August and possibly full council in August because of things are moving in that direction. And clearly, we need to think about that going forward the next few years. But I personally, on behalf of the Audit Committee, congratulate the audit team, notably Gemma, in particular, in doing a sterling job presenting those accounts in great detail to us and have a fantastic workshop before the meeting. And therefore, I would like to echo the sentiments of the leader here and, commend the accounts and the governance statements and all the other documentation as well.
Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor. As a fellow member of the Audit Committee, I'd also like to reiterate the comments from the Leader and the Chair of the Committee with regards to the hard work of the staff putting together the annual statement of accounts. It's no mean feat to do this for an organisation the size of the Vale Council with a turnover in excess of £380 million without needing a substantial number of corrections to be made. It's very pleasing we have an unqualified audit and there's only a small number of changes required from the draft version. I think putting this in context, another South Wales authority, much smaller than ours, is currently waiting on an investigation into around £12 million of misstatements from last year's accounts. So I think in that context, you can see the excellent job that our staff had done. As has been said, the job of compiling the annual accounts is being made harder because the deadlines for end-of-year closures in future are being brought forward, the transition being earlier in September and then into July. The suggestion has been made, was made at the audit meetings in the last, before the summer, that it should be a matter for the audit committee to provide assurance on the final set of accounts. But one of the comments that we were making was that we should continue to sign this off in full council if possible, rather than in the audit committee. The reason for this is that the audit committee engages with the detail of the accounts, but agreeing this in full council is an opportunity for all councillors to scrutinise these figures, to be able to show that they have had them shown to them, and just as importantly, given our currently limited recording, webcasting of meetings, an opportunity for the public to see us debate these issues as well. I think this is important because we have a very detailed discussion quite frequently around the setting of council tax and budgets, but we rarely go into the retrospective detail of what actually happened within that period of time. These are the accounts from the 2017-18 financial year. We discussed the budget setting process for this back in February and March last year, so 18 months ago. And we've had a lot of things have taken place in that time. Nevertheless, I think many residents of the Vale would probably be surprised to hear that the Vale made a profit of £6.7 million in that 17-18 financial year that was put into reserves. That sounds a surprising figure because we often hear from the council's comms messaging about how, as an authority, we're in dire straits and facing severe problems as we go forward. But this isn't a hidden figure. It's on page 2 of the annual statement. So it's something that people can see quite clearly, almost from the moment they open the document. It's there hidden in plain sight, £6.7 million. And for those who don't have a copy in front of them, what's described as the effective collection of council tax means we collected just over £1.5 million more than anticipated in the last financial year. The general policy area saw a £3.2 million profit, £1.4 million profit in the managing director and resources area, and £1.7 million from social services. And that's balanced in respect of the loss of around £500,000 from the environment and housing department and £700,000 taken from reserves, or just under £700,000 taken from reserves. And once these have been squirreled away in different places, the movement in reserve statement shows an increase in the General Council Fund and earmarked reserves from £76.7 million to £78.7 million, with the other monies placed in the Capital Receipts Reserve and what are termed unusable reserves that can't be accessed at this moment in time because they include some paper re-evaluations. But just for clarity, I'll repeat that, £78.7 million in our General Council Fund and our earmarked reserves. Now, those things are, by nature of the earmarked reserves, they are set aside for different events, including school development, etc., but the money is there. Now, we know that councils in England have faced huge cuts, and that's pushing some of them towards quite major service cuts and even Section 114 bankruptcy notices in some cases. But we in Wales, or at least in this council, are not in that position, and I would say in part that's because Plaid Cymru and the Welsh Assembly have argued that local council services are important and can't be cut to the bone. And I hope that all councillors here will be contacting their local assembly members in future to argue on our behalf in the next couple of weeks before we have the declarations regarding next year's figures. But that's why I stick by previous comments I've made about the need...
you have 1 minute.
Thank you very much. I've made about the need to balance council tax rises and services against the existing reserves that we have and the fact that we are responsible to the people of the Vale. Unnecessary council tax rises or service cuts affect the very people we are supposed to be helping, and that's why impact assessments are so important. We also shouldn't be scared of making long-term investments that benefit our community, such as the recent completion of the Council Housing Improvement Programme, the WHQS, if we can get a good deal and support our future generations. I'd like to just complete by, once again, a big thanks to the staff for all the excellent work that's been put in, all the help that's been provided to audit committee members, and give my support to the recommendations. I think it's a very good statement of our finances. Thank you.
Lita, would you like to respond?
Where do I start? Can I first of all thank Mark for his comments and concur with everything he said. I think we do need to keep an eye on these moving the target dates for getting the accounts in. There's not a lot we can do about it, but we do need to give our officers all the help we can to make sure that they're able to do that. Ian comes back to his usual comments about reserves and over-collection of council tax. Our council tax over-collection, as he calls it, is not a great deal. 1.5 million we're very close now. We've predicting 97.7, and you know, we're within point something of a percent of the collection that we're predicting. As I've said before, I'd much rather be on that side of it than the other side, that we don't collect what we predict. Otherwise, we end up with a bigger hole in our budget than what we currently have. And when you talk about reserves and the level of the reserves, as Ian is knows quite well, most of those reserves are earmarked for things. He did even mention it himself, but he's making the point that we've got plenty of money. We haven't got plenty of money. We've made savings of over 50 million over the last 9 years, and the way things are looking, we've got to make savings of approximately 17 million over the next couple of years. And it doesn't take much with a budget of over 200 million. It doesn't take much of a percentage swing to end up on the wrong side of things. So I'm more than happy with the figures that are before us. Our usable reserves are not excessive, and with that, I think I'm quite happy with what we got here in front of us, and hopefully over the next few years we will be able to maintain reserves so that we are in a reasonable position to face anything that comes our way.
Okay. Okay. All those in favour of the recommendations that a letter of representation to the Wales Audit Office 2017-18 be noted and agreed and signed by myself as Mayor, as Chairman of the Council. That the annual governance statement for 2017 and 18 be approved and signed by the Leader of the Council. And that you've already voted. Anyone against? And any abstentions? Okay. Moving on to agenda item 14 is to consider the following proposals from the Executive in relation to the Council's policy, framework and budget. Leader?
Okay, take them one at a time, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. That's, so 14A is the Treasury Management Closing Report. In July 2016, Cabinet considered and approved the annual report of the Council's Treasury Management operations for the period 1st of April 2017 to the 31st of March 2018. The report outlines the changing conditions under which Treasury Management operations were carried out during the year. The Council's primary objectives for the management of its investments are to give priority to the security and liquidity of its funds before seeking the best rate of return. This being the case, the authority placed the majority of funds available for investment purposes with other local authorities. These investments attract a slightly more favourable rate of return than investing with the UK government, but still give priority to the security of funds invested. When managing the Council's debt, the primary aim is to ensure its long-term affordability. In 2017-18, the Council continued to finance a significant proportion of its capital expenditure from internal resources. Insofar as the Council's Treasury Management operations entered into for the 2017-18 are concerned, all Treasury Management activity undertaken during the financial year complied with the amended approved strategy and the SIPFA Code of Practice and the relevant legislative provisions. I'm just requesting Council approves this report.
Second that, Mr. Mayor.
All those in favour? All those against? And any abstentions?
Well done, Kev.
Moving on to agenda item 14B. Leader?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And this is the Vale of Glamorgan's annual report. The report is a reference from Cabinet and seeks Council's endorsement of the annual improvement report, Improvement Plan Part 2. The purpose of the report is to set out in the Cabinet papers of the 17th of September, and that report has been considered by all scrutiny committees. In terms of process, the following scrutiny committees considered the issue in advance of reporting the matter to Cabinet on the 17th. That's Environment and Regeneration, Healthy Living and Social Care, and Homes and Safe Communities. The comments of the E&R Scrutiny Committee are reflected in a reference before you this evening. Since reporting to Cabinet on the 17th, the Learning and Culture Scrutiny Committee and the Corporate Performance and Resources Scrutiny Committee have also considered the issue, and the reference from the former is tabled this evening, having been emailed to all members in advance of this meeting. I won't dwell on the detail of the report, but I think it is worthwhile pointing out the structure and purpose of the report. This report is comprehensive and reviews the previous year's performance by wellbeing outcome and objective as set out in our corporate plan. It also incorporates our statutory reporting requirements, including outlining overall council contribution to the national wellbeing goals, a comparison of our performance using national benchmarking data where available, progress against our strategic collaborations, what our auditors say about us, how we have used our resources, and how we have engaged our residents. And in terms of the highlights, performance against each of the wellbeing outcomes outlined in the corporate plan and an overall performance status for the corporate plan is amber for 2017-18. 3 out of 4 corporate plan wellbeing objectives outcomes were attributed an overall RAG status of amber, reflecting the strong progress made in delivering our corporate plan priorities for 2017-18. The 4th wellbeing outcome, active and healthy Vale, achieved a green status, and corporate health achieved a green status at the end of the year. The Council's performance against the National Performance Indicator set relative to all Welsh local authorities is extremely pleasing yet again this year. And I recall just after forming the new administration last year, Councillor Johnson announced into this chamber that he would be looking forward to holding the administration to account when the 2017-18 data is released. Oh. Well, Councillor Johnson, you don't have to wait any longer. We have not only remained in the top performing council in Wales for the 4th year running in relation to this data set, but we have done so by some considerable distance. And the key highlights include 10 out of 18 indicators are in the top quartile of performers in Wales. These are in such areas as preventing homelessness, highway cleanliness standards, how we respond to fly tipping incidents, participation in leisure activities, pupil attainment at GCSE level, young people who are known not to be in education, employment or training, pupil attendance in primary and secondary schools, and speed of determined planning applications. Overall, the Vale performed better than the Welsh average in all but 2 indicators. That's 88% of the indicators. We are performing in the lower to bottom quartiles when compared to the rest of Wales in only 2 indicators relating to recycling totals and condition of A roads. And these matters that were subject to scrutiny in the ENR committee recently. And what makes this staggering is the fact that we have a very challenging funding situation and we are constantly transforming the way that we are delivering services at the same time as focusing on these key measures. To have not only retained our position but actually moved to a position of leading the way by some considerable distance is particularly rewarding. And I would like to take this opportunity to thank all of our officers for all the hard work that they put in all the time to enable us to remain at the top of that table. So I move that the report be accepted.
Yeah, I second that, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, all those in favour? Anyone against? Okay, that's carried. Thank you. Moving on to agenda item 15 is to receive questions and answers from members of the council. Question 1 is from Councillor Wilkinson to the leader.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Wilkinson, for your question. As you may be aware, Cardiff Council is solely responsible for administering the fund, and the Vale Council does not have a formal role in setting the investment policies, but saying that the Vale is able to send an observer to the investment panel meetings. Having said that, I can confirm that environmental campaigners have been engaging with Cardiff Council for several years in relation to the pension fund's investments in companies extracting and processing fossil fuels. There is currently a commitment for the Pensions Committee to consider divesting council investments from fossil fuel companies. To this end, work is ongoing to develop a climate change investment policy. To address this commitment, and it is proposed to have a draft ready for consideration by the committee before the end of 2018.
Supplementary, Councillor Wilkinson.
Will you keep us informed, and can we have the voting pattern of the panel, please?
Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Wilkinson. I'll certainly keep you informed. Whether you can have the voting pattern, I don't know, but if it's available, I will certainly see that you get it.
Question 2 is from Councillor Ian Johnson to the Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson, for your question. I can confirm that the Council has been notified that the school teachers' pay and conditions document has been published by the Department for Education and has now been laid in Parliament. I am aware of the announcements that have been made by Government indicating that financial support will be available to support the implementation of the pay award. However, we were still awaiting full details of what that funding will be. It is anticipated that Welsh Government will announce something as part of their budget in a few weeks, and I sincerely hope so, as I suspect to all members of this chamber, that any funding will be over and above the settlement and not, as has been the case in many other instances, simply in moving money around to generate headlines with no real increase in funding.
Councillor Johnson, supplementary.
Thank you for that response. Obviously, we're waiting upon Welsh Government, etc. to this. I am sure that you will do your best. But can you, in terms of our allocation, if that money is above and over what's been promised previously, will that money go to schools or will it go into our reserves?
Leader.
I don't think. What we're wondering is whether we're going to have enough money to pay the settlement, not whether we're going to have more than enough. So I think it's highly unlikely that it's going to be over and above. But if there's anything over, it will obviously be prioritised in the best way possible. I can't imagine there's going to be any. We're going to get more than what we need to pay the pay deal.
Question 3 is from Councillor Johnson to the Cabinet Member for Neighbourhood Services and Transport.
Mr Mayor, Councillor Johnson, the Capita draft parking strategy is currently subject to public consultation, with a closing date for comments of the 28th of September this year. Fortunately, of course, as you're well aware, there are still 2 days left for you to make any comments you wish, including, if you haven't already done so, pointing out any errors you feel may be evident within the Capita report. You may well have pointed those out already to some of our officers. All comments made, including those suggesting any errors in the report, will then be considered by the relevant Cabinet and scrutiny meetings before a final strategy is produced.
Supplementary.
Thank you for that non-response from the Cabinet Member. Can he confirm that there is a table missing regarding on-street parking charges for the High Street area of around 199 parking places, and why he didn't ensure that these issues were all corrected prior to the consultation rather than waste 2 months discussing errors in the document that we paid £48,000 for?
All I can do is assure you that any errors and any comments will be discussed with the Cabinet and also by the scrutiny committees in due course.
Question 4 is from Councillor Johnson to the Cabinet Member for Regeneration and Planning.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. A little deja vu, I feel. Members will be aware that you asked me similar questions at a number of previous councils, and I'll try not to repeat myself in the answer. It's clearly unfortunate that in the last 12 months there have been a number of closures of national retail operators, including Sports Direct and Dorothy Perkins in Holton Road. These closures are largely driven by trends and issues affecting the retailing sector in general, and town centres nationally, against which Barry has done remarkably well up until these recent closures. Nevertheless, the Council is doing all it can to try and help town centres and its retailers throughout this very difficult period, and this includes developing and reporting on the town centre framework, developing, attending the Holton Road Town Centre Forum with traders, through which there have been a number of items of support developed for traders, including improved parking arrangements. Meetings have also been held with the traders regarding the development of a business improvement district for Barry, and the Council have approached Welsh Government to secure funding to take this process forward. We are awaiting an announcement from Welsh Government, which is imminent. The Council is working with Barry Town Council to hold a Town Centre Summit in the autumn with traders and property owners with the aim of listening and helping to promote ideas to support the Town Centre. The Council has been successful in conjunction with Barry Town Council and the Memo Art Centre in its bid for funding from the Heritage Lottery Fund to support the development of the Sense of Place work for Barry, of which a key part will be the Town Centre, and we hope to appoint a place manager for Barry in the next month or so and take this work forward. Finally, I think all members would agree that it is important that keeping the vibrancy and vitality in our town centres is important, and taking a positive and flexible approach to the uses which can operate outside the town centres will also help ensuring that empty premises are kept to a minimum.
Supplementary, Councillor Johnson.
Thank you for that answer. It's deja vu because it's not working. I walked down earlier and I walked past a parade of 12 shops and 9 of them were closed. You know, this is not working well. Will the Cabinet member commit to not supporting actions that will have a negative impact upon Halton Road, such as the car parking proposals that his Cabinet have put forward?
Councillor Johnson, as you fully appreciate, the car parking consultation is out, and I have urged all the traders to submit their comments to it. I firmly believe that the right car parking strategy will be a benefit to the traders and not a hindrance. And I will always support the traders in any which way I can, but I am limited by funds and schemes that come from Welsh Government. But I will do all I possibly can to encourage trade and keep Barry as vibrant as we possibly can.
Question number 5 is from Councillor Johnson to the Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. The question is on the impact of Brexit. I can confirm that the Council has included the risks associated with Brexit and its possible fallout within its quarterly updated risk register, and has been working regionally with the Welsh Local Government Association and liaising with colleagues from Welsh and UK Government throughout the Brexit process to ensure that harm to the economy and future of the Vale of Glamorgan is minimised. This includes working with the WLJ and other councils to lobby Welsh and UK Government to ensure that replacement funding for schemes such as Rural Community Development Fund and other assisted area funding is secured from the proposed Shared Prosperity Fund. Locally, we will be continuing to offer support and, where appropriate, advice to businesses, farmers and traders, or where necessary, direct them to the relevant external advice on the possible effects and opportunities of Brexit, and try to help business navigate and survive the undoubted challenges the process of leaving the EU will bring.
Supplementary, Dr. Johnson.
Thank you for that answer, Leader. Brexit will happen before the next financial year begins. That's how short the timescale is. Will you bring a report to Cabinet that, like the one that Pembrokeshire County Council did, which examines in detail the potential impacts of Brexit upon the area, so that residents can see and make their own preparations for what will happen after 31st of March?
I'll certainly look into that, Councillor Johnson.
Question 6 is from Councillor Nick Hodges to the Cabinet Member for Learning and Culture.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Hodges, for your question on the paintings of Margaret Lindsay Williams at Dyffryn House. The transfer of Dyffryn House to the National Trust was subject to a number of legal agreements, including a lease for a 50-year term. Included in that transfer was a wide range of fixed and immovable assets linked to the property, which are in the care of the National Trust, subject to those agreements for the term of the lease.
Supplementary.
I'll have to change what I was going to ask, because I'm a bit stunned with that.
Not a good way.
When did National Trust stumbled across these paintings in the basement. They had no idea they were there. So how can you be sure that they were on any list of assets that were transferred over? But I will ask the other one as well. Will you commit the Vale of Glamorgan to have an inventory of historical artefacts and other cultural items held by them? And will there be a report to Cabinet on this?
One
Thank
sec,
you,
Cabinet
Councillor
member.
Hodges.
Bob, one sec. Councillor Hodges, which one would you like answered? You're allowed one.
Yeah, I'd like to know what the hell's going on.
Cabinet member.
Thank you, Councillor Hodges. I mean, I share an interest with you in painters, and this one, especially known for her paintings on royalty, is something we should be sure of where they're going to. Can I just give you assurance that we will look into it with the officers and legal, and then go through the actual detail of the lease to ensure all these paintings are covered in that document. Okay, thank you.
Question 7 is from Councillor Hodges to the Deputy Leader and Cabinet Member for Regulatory Services and Legal Services.
Thank you, Councillor Hodges. You asked what the Council's position is on the release of, in the Severn Channel, only a few miles from our coastline, of mud taken from the immediate vicinity of Hinkley Point nuclear power station. This is a surprising question because you should be aware of the authority's position. We have expressed considerable concerns. The matter has been the subject of debate at both scrutiny and Cabinet over recent months. You will also be aware that this authority's concerns have been expressed to Welsh Government at Cabinet Secretary level, official level, and at Natural Resources Wales level. It is our interest and concern that actually led to this issue being raised regionally and nationally.
Councillor Hodges, do you have a supplementary?
Sorry.
If this scheme continues, what monitoring will the Vale of Glamorgan carry out to ensure the safety of residents and visitors?
This is a bit of deja vu again, I think. Yeah. The regulating authority for this process is Natural Resources Wales, the NRW. They have provided the latest detailed information on this topic on their website, and I would respectfully request that you read it. We recognise the public concern on the issue, and the Environment and Regeneration Scrutiny Committee considered the grant of the licence in November 2017. Officers from the Council have also been in contact with NRW and have met representatives from their company to discuss the process and the basis on which the marine licence was granted. NRW was advised by experts from the Centre for Environment, Fisheries and Aquaculture Science, and also consulted Public Health Wales and Public Health England. This council that is, are advised that all relevant checks have been undertaken. The material is safe for disposal with no risk to persons or the environment. Clearly, like many, if not all members in this chamber, I would rather if a disposal point further away from our coastline had been selected. But the Council has no powers to determine this and has to trust the views of the regulating authority and their associated experts. I hope that answers some of your concerns, Nick.
Question number 8 is from Councillor Birch to the Deputy Leader.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Birch. The Council recognises the public concern on this issue, as I said in the answer to my previous question. And the Environment and Regeneration Scrutiny Committee considered the grant of the licence in November of last year. Officers from the Council have also been in contact with NRW and have met representatives from the company to discuss the process and the basis on which the marine licence was granted. I'm sorry if I'm repeating myself, but it's largely the same information I'm passing on. NRW was advised by experts from the Centre for Environment, Fisheries and Aquaculture Science, and also consulted with Public Health Wales and Public Health England. Council's advised that all relevant checks have been undertaken and the material is safe for disposal with no risk to persons or the environment. Clearly, like many members, if not all members in this chamber, I would rather if a disposal point further away from the coastline had been selected, but the Council has no power to determine this and has to trust the views of the regulating authority and their associated experts.
Would you like a supplementary?
Yes, thank you. At the risk of repeating yourself, is the council going to be carrying out monitoring of the water quality in the relevant area?
The answer is I have no plans to authorise monitoring by this council of those things, but I'm reassured that the sediment has been tested independently and the results scrutinised by nuclear and public health experts, all working to international standards as defined by the International Atomic Energy Agency. The results show that the sediment contains only a very small amount of radioactivity, most of which is naturally occurring and well within acceptable limits for disposal at sea. Again, as I said previously, I'd rather the material be disposed of in another location, primarily due to the public concern that does genuinely exist on this issue. But this council has no control over this. Thank you.
Question 9 is from Councillor Perks to the leader.
Thank you, Councillor Perks, for your question. Question is regarding universal credit. I'm confident that the necessary plans are in place to support the implementation of universal credit in the Vale, both within the authority and also to provide the necessary support for individuals in the Vale of Glamorgan who will experience these changes. I will refer you to a report that was considered by Corporate Performance and Resources Scrutiny Committee on the 20th of September 2018. The report outlines the impact of welfare reform to date in the Vale and outlines the work that has been ongoing to ensure that appropriate levels of support are in place to support our citizens when the full rollout commences next month.
Councillor Perks, supplementary.
Can the Cabinet member or the leader assure us that no eviction procedures will be implemented by the Vale of Glamorgan Council against residents affected by the rollout of universal credit?
Thank you for the supplementary. I can assure you that this council will do and always does everything possible to support people who find themselves in difficulty, and we will do everything we possibly can to help anyone who finds themselves in difficulty over the introduction of universal credit. Thank you.
Question 10 is from Councillor Perks to the Cabinet Member for Neighbourhood Services and Transport.
Mr Mayor, Councillor Perks, the resources section of the Cabinet report on Capita's draft parking strategy, presented to Cabinet on the 2nd of July 2018, advised the total estimated potential maximum revenue, estimated capital and revenue costs. And paragraph 45 of the report gives all the information you have requested, so I'm a bit surprised at the actual question. However, to be helpful as possible, I can give you the details that the annual maximum revenue from charges is estimated at £1.5 million, though the annual revenue costs of £238,000 would have to be deducted from this. The capital outlay will depend on future decisions as to whether car parking charges are introduced, and if so, what areas, in what areas and locations. As I have previously advised, the Capita draft parking strategy is currently subject to public consultation with a closing date for comments of the 28th of September. As no decision has been taken by Cabinet on what the final draft parking strategy will include, and therefore what it will cost to implement and what revenue will be generated.
Supplementary, Councillor Perks.
I just wonder, the question is it worth it if considered in relation to the huge impact on local residents?
I think in answer to that one, it is a draft strategy produced by Capita. It is still subject to consultation with the scrutiny committees before it goes to Cabinet. So while it's in the draft report, I cannot tell you at the moment, of course, because I'm keeping an open mind on the matter. I cannot tell you what is going to be implemented and what is not.
Question 11 is from Councillor Perks to the Cabinet Member for Neighbourhood Services and Transport.
Councillor Perks. The relationship between car parking and footfall is quite complex. However, it is clear that it is not appropriate for car parking spaces close to retail areas to be occupied all day by the same cars. This does not allow a turnover of car parking spaces for customers to town centre shops. Allowing a free car parking period in car parks, i.e. making the first 1 or 2 hours free, then applying charges after that, this can encourage a greater turnover of parking spaces in car parks and on street, therefore making it easier for those that wish to visit the town centre to find convenient and safe parking. And this in turn can boost the local town centre economy and footfall.
Supplementary.
In contrast to the Council's move towards a living wage for its employees, how can we justify the huge impact on many local people currently employed on minimum wages in our town centres?
Well, can I say, first of all, about the studies which are produced on management car parking, that this has a good effect on local economy. And one of the common themes emerging from such studies as this is not about having as many parking spaces as possible, but ensuring spaces remain available to those who need them most. And better management of parking can enhance the public spaces, making our towns more attractive to visitors and improving their economy, their economic viability. But I'm sure, like me, you have travelled round in circles before now, trying to find parking spaces with none being available. And of course, we are talking in the draft report of having periods where it will not be charged. So there is going to be time allocated, according to the Capita draft report, time available for people to shop without charging.
Okay. Moving on to agenda item 16, which is questions from the public. Under the Council's public participation guides, a maximum of 30 minutes is allowed for all public questions at Council meetings. In order to ensure that all 21 questions are available to be answered tonight in a time, I would respectfully suggest that the questions are taken as read. Thank you. Agenda item 16, question number 1 is from Mr. Weston to the Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Weston, for the question. And without having specific detail, it is difficult to comment in full, but I will do my best. Questions should be directed to the relevant Cabinet Member, and it is the responsibility of that Cabinet Member to answer the questions raised. I know I speak for all my colleagues that when in receipt of questions, they will always endeavour to answer as fully as possible. If, however, you remain concerned or are dissatisfied with any answer provided, then you are able to raise the matter directly with the Cabinet Member in question or with myself as Leader. As members, we regularly receive correspondence from constituents, and we always seek to respond to all correspondence in as full a manner as possible. Alternatively, if you feel aggrieved, you also have the option of contacting the Council's Monitoring Officer.
Question two is from Mr. Brown to the Cabinet Member for Regeneration and Planning.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. The Council has marketed the IQ Southern Development site as a mixed-use development opportunity, and during February 2018 selected a preferred bidder. The Council is presently engaged in ongoing discussions with that preferred bidder, and due to the financial, commerciality and confidentiality, we are unable to provide any more information at this stage.
Question 3 is from Mr. Brown to the Cabinet Member for Regeneration and Planning.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. The Council does intend to remarket Nels Point site in the coming months and hopes to attract suitable leisure and hotel operators back to the island to build on the considerable improvement already undertaken by the Council to the island. And I can assure you that we have had tremendous amount of interest from developers about this site. We have tried to make sure that when we market this, we market it in the best way possible to get the best attractions for Barry Island.
Question 4 is from Mr Weston to the Cabinet Member for Neighbourhood Services and Transport.
Thank you, Mr Weston. The Council's Traffic and Highway Design team has considered the situation regarding motorcycle access to bus lanes within the Vale, and particularly those along Port Road, in some detail. The issues to be considered are specifically related to the design characteristics of the bus lane in question, which will dictate whether it is suitable and safe to accommodate all motorcycle users safely. Due to the highway constraints along Port Road, particularly the width of the carriageway available, the design characteristics associated with the bus lane along this route are distinctly different to bus lanes in other local authority areas, as well as the speed limit being significantly higher than bus lanes in Cardiff city centre, which are limited to 30 miles an hour. As a consequence, the Council's experienced and professional highway and traffic engineers have several safety concerns regarding their use by motorcyclists, which they are currently working through to establish a definitive position. Discussions have taken place between Council traffic officers and a motorcycle action group on this matter, and they have acknowledged the Council officers' current concerns. We aim to conclude our studies in this area and provide a position on the request for the use of the lane by motorcyclists by the end of the calendar year.
Okay, question number 5 is from Mr Farquharson to the Cabinet Member for Regeneration and Planning.
Thank you, Mr Farquharson, for your question. Creative Rural Communities is a European and Welsh Government grant-led initiative under the RDP, Rural Development Plan for Wales. Its geographic coverage reflects criteria set for that particular programme, and it has been indeed highly successful in facilitating community-led regeneration. There is, of course, no single definition of rurality, and rurality must be considered within the context of a given area and the services in question. The RDP criteria set in Brussels bears no direct relevance to the categorisation of local schools, and creative rural communities is unable to deliver regeneration through supporting statutory services. Local context and the subjective interpretation of what it means to be rural is part of the rationale for Welsh Government's consultation on the classification of schools as rural or not. Any universal definition across sectors is not applicable. If it had been applicable, the question of whether a school is rural or not would be a foregone conclusion and would have negated the need for Welsh Government to develop a list of designated rural schools.
Question 6 is from Mrs Ockerby to the Leader.
Thank you, Mrs Ockerby, for your question. The first point I will make is that the Council has not yet taken a decision to introduce any new car park charging arrangements. The Capita Draft Car Parking Strategy report is currently subject to comprehensive public consultation, and any decisions ultimately taken on parking arrangements will be based on the available evidence, with consideration given to the views expressed in the consultation process. The Capita report recommends charging at town centre car parks which are frequented by shoppers and other car parks such as those in coastal areas and historic towns and villages which are visitor attractors. None of the main council offices fall into these categories. Even the civic offices, which are open for free shopper parking at weekends and evenings, is largely empty during these times. In the Capita report, this car park is suggested as being a long stay car park with charging at certain times, and our officers will have to consider the viability of this in view of any charging infrastructure costs and its limited current use at weekends.
Question 7 is from Mr. Parry to the leader.
Mr. Parry, thank you for your question. The question is on rural schools. The Council is proud of its rural communities and offers a number of mechanisms for support, such as the Creative Rural Communities Support Grant, which organisations in Lancarvan have benefited from. The Vale of Glamorgan Council supports the principle of supporting rural schools, however disagrees with the application of the definition under Welsh Government's current proposal regarding rural schools. Specifically, the Council has asserted that Lancarvan Village is no different from other areas within the Vale which have not been included. A better definition of a rural school in regard to the presumption against closure will be the distance required to be travelled to the next available school. The Council has other schools in the Vale of Glamorgan area which are considered from an educational perspective to be similar to Lancarvan, which Welsh Government has not designated as rural schools, for example Lansana and Langarn. The ethos of Welsh Government's approach to the presumption against the closure of rural schools does not mean that a rural school will never close. But the case for closure must be strong, and all viable options to closure must have been conscientiously considered by the proposer, including federation. With regard to the proposal on reconfiguring primary school provision in the Western Vale, and having regard to the school organisation code, the proposal is not considered a school closure.
Question number 8 is from Mrs. Fell to the leader.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mrs. Fell, for your question, and again a question on rural schools. The legal definition of a rural school is determined by Welsh Government, not by the Council. Welsh Government has advised that it uses the National Statistics Urban-Rural Classification as a basis for the designation, and the Council would adhere to the requirements of the proposed second edition of the School Organisation Code in regard to this matter.
Question number 9 is from Mr. Venasina to the leader.
Okay, question from, thank you, Mr. Valencia, the Protecting Rural Schools. The proposed second edition of the School Organisation Code 2013 makes special provisions in regard to rural schools aimed at establishing a procedural presumption against their closure. This will require proposers to follow a more detailed set of procedures and requirements in formulating any proposal relating to a rural school closure. The Council's proposal in regard to the reconfiguration of primary school provision in the Western Vale is a regulated alteration under section 2.2 of the School Organisation Code 2013. The alternatives considered were outlined in the consultation proposal, and following this in the consultation report and the appendices, which were considered by Cabinet on the 17th of September. In respect of school organisation, the Council is under statutory duty to ensure, amongst other things, that the right schools are in the right places for the right number of pupils in the Council's area, to provide all pupils with the opportunity for appropriate education. The proposal to reconfigure primary school provision in the Western Vale would enable the Council to meet its statutory requirements in regard to the provision of school places, as well as sustaining Lancarvan School into the future by providing a brand new building which is fit for purpose for the 21st century. At a national level, there is much that can be learnt from the educational approaches used by other countries. However, there is a need to contextualise that learning and adapt it to fit the national culture and structure. The Welsh Government drew on research into a range of education systems during the development of the National Mission for Education in Wales 2017 to 20. The Council ensures all schools in the Vale of Glamorgan are supported to work towards the goals set out in that mission. One of the key actions which supports this national plan is the continuation of upgrading the quality of school buildings through the 21st Century Schools and Education Programme. We facilitate and support schools to share best practice and collaborate to improve learner outcomes. You might be aware that there are a number of schools in the Vale of Glamorgan that have received national recognition for their excellent practice. Community engagement and involvement in schools is an important element of education. Schools across the Vale are already seeing positive benefits as a result of engaging their communities in school life. Naturally, we would encourage the community to support and engage with Lancarvan School in the future.
Question number 10 is from Dr Farquharson to the Cabinet Member for Learning and Culture.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you, Dr Farquharson, for your question on travelling for schools. Nursery provision develops and supports consistency across the foundation phase, and it's a known contributor towards pupils' levels of attainment, as highlighted in the Donaldson report. All children in Wales are entitled to a minimum of 10 hours of free part-time foundation phase education in a school, or funded private nursery, in the term following their 3rd birthday, although their parents are not required to access this entitlement. The Council has a statutory duty to ensure the right schools, including nursery units, are in the right locations and provides sufficient places for the area it serves. The proposal to reconfigure primary school provision in the Western Vale highlights that the majority of pupils who attend Llancarvan Primary School do not live within the catchment area. In developing proposals, parents are not being forced to move house or leave their jobs. Parents have the opportunity to express a preference for any school, even across county borders, should parents decide that it is in their interest or their children's best interest to do so. As it currently stands, there is no local nursery provision in Llancarvan. The nearest is 3.4 miles at St Athan, followed by 3.6 miles in Roos and 4.7 miles in Llanfair. It's not possible for the Council to develop proposals on school organisation based on the personal circumstances of parents, such as work location. Free school transport is available for primary age school pupils from September after they turn 4, who reside 2 or more miles away from their school. Details of this have been included within the consultation documentation and the subsequent consultation report.
Question number 11 is from Mrs Locklear Edwards to the Leader.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thank you, Mrs Lovelock Edwards, for your question. The question is regarding closure of Llancarvan School. No statutory proposals with regard to Llancarvan Primary School were developed or consulted on prior to the consultation in respect of this proposal, which commenced in March 2018. School organisation and access requires an agile approach in managing school place planning and is of course affected by a number of variables across an ever-changing landscape, not least of which includes new housing developments and increased demand for school places in certain areas. Councils are required by Welsh Government to constantly review and rationalise school places and to support schools through investment initiatives such as the 21st Century Schools Programme to ensure learning environments are fit for purpose and support teaching reflective of the aims of an evolving national curriculum.
Question number 12 is from Mrs Betley to the Cabinet Member for Learning and Culture.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you, Mrs Betley, for your question on closure of rural schools. The designation of rural schools for the purposes of the presumption against closure is intended to ensure that proposers follow a more detailed set of procedures and requirements in formulating a rural school closure proposal and in consulting and reaching a decision as to whether to implement a rural school closure proposal. This does not mean that rural schools will never close, but the case for closure must be strong and not taken until all viable alternatives have been considered. It is the Welsh Government's responsibility to maintain its list of designated rural schools and not a matter for the Council. As previously stated, the proposal is in part to move the staff and pupils to a new site and is a regulated alteration under Section 2.2 of the School Organisation Code of 2013. It is not a school closure. The Council's primary statutory duty in relation to primary school education is to ensure there is adequate provision, support and opportunity to succeed for all pupils, staff and schools. We provide services too, and we should be judged on our ability to deliver that, which I believe this proposal will contribute to.
Question number 13 is from Mr Locke to the Cabinet Member for Neighbourhood Services and Transport.
Mr Mayor, Councillor Locke, I would apologise to Mr Locke for the rather obvious error in the consultant's report. Also, the occupancy rate for this car park at the time of the survey was indeed low. Whilst its use could increase with additional parking controls in the town, and primarily controls that our officers have planned for the leisure centre car park, it may not ultimately be viable to introduce charging at this location. This will be assessed and determined prior to the final parking strategy document being produced.
Question number 14 is from Mr. Locke to the Cabinet Member for Neighbourhood Services and Transport.
Mr. Locke, again. There's a world of difference between determining that a draft parking strategy document should be released into the public domain in full for comment, rather than not, and properly considering the views of the public, the worth of which being the main reason for Cabinet's decision. I can assure you that a consultation document will be published and properly considered as part of our final decision-making process.
Question 15 is from Mr. Locke to the Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Locke, for your question. It's regarding fixed penalty notices. I'm aware of the issue, as you will be aware that I joined you for one of your beach clean sessions earlier in the season. But looking particularly at the example of Bristol, this is not a new initiative. The Vale of Glamorgan has worked with a private environmental enforcement partner for the past 5 years. The Bristol scheme is a pilot based on a share of any profits when all costs borne by the private enforcement company have been taken out. The best performance of such arrangements are generally cost neutral, and there is always a preference by the private companies towards issuing fixed penalty notices to smokers. Whilst all littering is abhorrent, members of the public generally are more concerned about dog fouling or such litter as fast food containers. Hence, our arrangements with our private enforcement partners, 3GS, are designed to mirror this, and not just to penalise what is often perceived as an easy target, smokers. To date, 3GS has issued 1,280 fixed penalty notices on behalf of the Council. 25.3% of these have been for smoking-related litter, whereas 40% have been for general litter, the remainder for other general waste and dog control offences. I would also point out that in terms of enforcement on the beach at Barry Island, this would be very difficult due to the sheer numbers of visitors at peak times. The sight of enforcement officers walking between groups of bathers and families on the beach would not be positive, and we would rather use other methods to reinforce the appropriate management of litter, such as regular tannoy announcements and public information boards.
Question number 16 is from Mr. Locke to the Leader.
Quite a conversation tonight, Mr. Locke and myself. Can I thank you for your question, Mr. Locke? The investment in new webcasting equipment will enable us to live stream more committee meetings, including meetings of scrutiny and Cabinet. This is something that I am keen to plan for so that we can make progress once the new equipment is installed, which is estimated to be by the end of October this year. I will, of course, need to discuss arrangements with all councillors in the hope of getting agreement to widen the webcasting services in this way.
Question number 17 is from Mr. Locke to the Cabinet Member for Social Care and Health and...
Mr. Mayor, thank you, Mr. Locke, for providing me with a question tonight. No, I do not. I see it as an example of the Council investing in the future and investing in the health and well-being of our residents in the Vale of Glamorgan. I believe it is an excellent example of a Council achieving the best value from the facilities over a period of time, but also investing in future generations to secure or to ensure that our leisure provision meets the expectations of our customers for a long period of time.
Question number 18 is from Mr. Locke to the Leader.
Here we go again. I would refer you to the Council Constitution, which is available to the public on the Council's website. The Council makes provision for public questions and has a procedure which in my opinion is one of the most open in Wales when compared to some other councils. For example, some councils have a cap on the number of questions, which would certainly curtail you tonight, and that one individual can submit. We have also demonstrated that as a council we can be flexible with our procedures, as demonstrated at the previous council meeting when my council colleagues agreed to waive the 30-minute period for public questions in order that all questions could be answered. Council Procedure Rule 14.8.7, on page 22 of the Council's Constitution, does provide for members to ask a supplementary question. However, this is conditional. The supplementary question must arise out of the original question or reply. It is important to note that the Mayor is the final arbiter on the validity of such a question. I do not see this as an issue of discrimination, but an issue of elected members having the mandate of the electorate. If you do have further questions, and I note you have submitted several for this meeting, I would invite you to email me personally. My contact details are available on the Council's website, with a view to developing dialogue on matters of mutual concern and interest.
Question 19 is from Mr. Locke to the leader.
This is the last one. It's about social media. We've published one post on Facebook regarding a draft parking strategy consultation, which reached 13,862 people. We have also promoted it on Twitter, in the local newspapers, with adverts in 3 editions of the Gem, as well as articles in all of the local papers and Wales Online. Posters advertising the drop-in sessions have been in all the main council buildings and sent to the town and community councils and libraries. For most consultation projects, we share 2 Facebook posts, one at the beginning of the consultation and one towards the end. This is due to the nature of Facebook and the impact that the posts have. If we over-promote something, people tend to not take any notice of it. We found fewer posts make a bigger impression. I'm happy to schedule in more tweets if that's what you wish.
Question number 20 is from Mr. Clark to the leader.
Thank you, Mr. Clark. I don't see him present. But, I'm surprised to receive the question. I have met and been in communication with you on a regular and frequent basis since forming the new administration in May of last year. We have always had what I thought was a constructive dialogue on matters of mutual concern and interest. As a result, I'm surprised that the opportunity has not been taken to raise this issue with me personally during our ongoing dialogue. On this occasion, I must say that I do not share the concerns you express. I personally have always attempted to answer the questions asked of me, and I know my Cabinet colleagues do the same. That said, and in terms of the specific question, right at the end of what was otherwise a statement, I am more than happy to consider how we can improve on the current system, as this is a council that takes every opportunity to improve wherever possible.
Question number 21 is from Mr. Stockdale to the leader.
I don't see Mr. Stockdale present either. But, it assumes that the above question relates to planning applications. Although it does not expressly state this, it is difficult to second guess what the actual issue relates to, particularly as issues around air quality and pollution are not the sole responsibility of the council. Nevertheless, on the assumption that it is related to the planning process, it is important to note that each year the council considers approximately 1,300 planning applications, ranging from simple household extensions to major housing and industrial developments. Around 4 to 5% of mainly the largest and most important applications in the Vale of Glamorgan are dealt with by Planning Committee, with the remainder by designated chief officers under the approved scheme of delegation. The scheme of delegation allows those applications that are likely to be minor in nature or impact to be dealt with by officers acting impartially, taking account of the adopted local development plan and any other material considerations. This process is required by Welsh Government, who advocates Planning Committee delegating most planning decisions to ensure timely decisions and freeing up committee members to concentrate on major development, policy issues or controversial cases. Those matters that are reported to Planning Committee include those major developments that are of importance to the wider general public, or those matters that require more public scrutiny because of the specifics of the application. Irrespective of whether planning applications are determined under delegated powers or by planning committee, all relevant information is made available to all councillors and the public through the council's online planning register, so that interested persons have every opportunity to engage with the council as local planning authority. Whilst comments from third parties are not automatically available because they do not form part of the planning application, they can be viewed on request. The council's scheme of delegation has been operating successfully for many years in accordance with clear advice from Welsh Government, and has been adapted over time in response to changes in the regulatory framework, and is considered to be appropriate and fit for purpose. Therefore, the council does not intend to revisit its process of delegation to officers. However, any member of the public interested in a particular planning application is invited to liaise with the planning department about their concerns, and or contact their local councillor to share their concerns, or request their representative to call in an application to the planning committee, which would be at the discretion of the councillor concerned.
Okay, moving on to agenda item 7. I have no urgent decisions under part 1 and none under part 2, so the meeting is now closed. Thank you.